Faultline's crew is a Cape/supervillain mercenary group based in the Brockton Bay Palanquin nightclub. However, due to that mercenary status, it was not an uncommon occurrence for them to be absent from said club and doing jobs elsewhere. Said jobs varied, but generally they would go where the money is, to the extent where despite the entirety of Brockton Bay being against the actions of the ABB during their bombing/terror campaign, Faultline stated herself that if the ABB paid out, they would side with them. Otherwise, Faultline's crew would not fight for free, and if they did, it was due to extraordinary circumstances and or if the given issues interfered with their affairs/endeavors. Interestingly, the group did have limits. In the words of Tattletale, they would do, quote, anything short of murder. Though, as shown by their willingness to work with the ABB, they were at least professionally fine working with more quote-unquote evil clientele. Anyway, the question of their morality is neither here nor there for this video, so onwards we go. Another bit of information of note is that Faultline's crew largely consists of Case 53s, parahumans that, for the most part, were severely mutated by their powers, had no memories of who they were, and were branded with a mark resembling an omega sign/stylized C. Due to the latter, Faultline often saw her Case 53 members use their earnings to investigate any potential leads about their origins and of Case 53s in general, which in turn led to her also having an interest in Case 53s. Well, with general background out of the way, let us move on to parahumans, beginning with, who else? Faultline. Faultline is a striker. Her power is the ability to separate molecular bonds in materials such as dead wood, metal, stone, and plastic. Basically anything inorganic. When she separates said bonds, she creates holes or cuts depending on how much effort she puts in and or how many points of contact she has. Note that despite her best efforts to overcome her power being mapped and limited to non-living things, she has yet to even influence living wood, let alone flesh and blood creatures. When it comes down to how her power feels to her, she pushes energy into the places she is touching. She can feel her power priming itself, in a manner of speaking, around where she is making contact, and if she wills it into the point, she can leave a hole about a third of an inch across. If she puts in extra effort, she can deepen the hole and have it extend several inches into the object she is in contact with. Though, if she wants, she can do quick swipes and slice into things. Evidently, that is not the full extent of her power. As it was implied earlier, her power does work better the more points of contact she has with a given object. When she is touching multiple points on something, she can feel the points connect to each other like lines of electricity. When she is ready, she pushes herself and her power into the object, causing the quote-unquote lines to expand and compound each other, causing matter in between and around to be destroyed. Note that she does not seem to need skin contact for her power to take effect, as evidenced by the fact that her power recognized her boot connecting with a wall as a viable contact point. Before I continue on to weaknesses, I want to state that I'm probably not doing a countermeasure section anymore for the simple fact that I have progressively become more and more dissatisfied with how I do that section. And because I don't think it really fits with how I originally intended these videos to be like. Anyway, to put it simply, her biggest weakness is the fact that her power, as mentioned before, cannot affect living things. Of course, while Faultline is very proficient in using her power, especially in tangent with others, she nevertheless cannot directly attack people with her power. Besides that, another weakness is the fact that at times, depending on the foe, she'll need to get dangerously close to them. She's not a brute, and she knows that, but sometimes she does need to close the distance to fully take advantage of her power. Like the time she fought Trainwreck where she got up close to cut his armor and to make pitfalls. Now, I do not typically describe what given Cape's costume or personal equipment since I did not really think of them as relevant to the type of videos I feel like making. But upon further reflection, I may now, from time to time, mention such things if I find them to be particularly important to the defensive and or offensive capabilities of a parahuman. Where do I set that bar? We'll see. Nevertheless, Faultline has a much more utilitarian mindset, as reflected in her costume. She wears a bullet-resistant vest for obvious reasons, a sort of welder's mask to protect her eyes, and to fool adversaries she has a detachable false ponytail with spikes in it. More so as to not be solely reliant on her power, and considering the latter's noted weaknesses, she also carries around a flare gun and semi-automatic pistol. All that stuff aside, she is luckily not typically alone and has fairly reliable teammates, such as Gregor the Snail. someone who can be concurrently considered a blaster, tinker, and brute in large part due to his Case 53 status. Going in reverse, the brute status comes from a variety of things. His internal organs are immersed in viscous fluids, his bones are more akin to cartilage, making them more likely to bend rather than outright break, and said bones when broken healed faster than normal bones. All this led to him to be much more resistant to blunt force trauma. To what extent? Who knows, but at the very least getting hit by a car does not seem to pose much of an issue. As for Gregor's potential blaster and tinker status, they go hand in hand. Due to his unique biology, he can secrete slime from his skin. Said slime is produced in his stomach, where he can alter its composition and effects. To name a few of them, he can create adhesives, lubricants, strong acids, fire retardant, and a variety of other chemicals. Though, the ambiguity of what he can produce is what makes his potential tinker classification a bit iffy. His blaster status comes from the simple fact that he can project his slime in a stream from his skin. Note that none of these classifications are confirmed, but more speculative. I can't really say too much in terms of weaknesses besides stating that he's not that durable, so more normal means of violence are still viable, with a little extra effort. Though, I will mention that while his slime can protect him from the more immediate effects of fire, the heat of the latter can still very much roast him alive. Moving on, Newter is another Case 53, and he is a striker, mover, and to an extent a brute. The brute classification, similar to Gregor, is speculative, but he has been shown to be much more resilient than a baseline human. After suffering a deep forearm-length knife wound below his shoulder blade, and after bleeding out enough blood to generate a noticeable puddle of blood, he was relatively soon after able to talk and walk around, a feat that an on-site medic found to be surprising. Though he was out of breath and needed assistance moving longer distances. More so, if his allies had not administered on-the-spot aid before sending him to an actual medic, he presumably would have been a bit more worse off. On an additional note, he is also immune to bacteria, parasites, and infections in general due to his biology. As for the mover rating, he has been described as like a, quote, bolt of greased lightning. In terms of actual examples, when on a half-run/crawl, he seemed to have been able to keep up with one of Bitch's amped-up dogs. Additionally, he was able to leap at least around 15 feet /4.572 meters, along with being able to quickly scale up walls. Before moving on to his striker aspect, some miscellaneous details worth mentioning is how he could more generally just stick onto surfaces via his toes and fingers. Additionally, he also had a prehensile tail that was strong enough to push/shove people back. Okay then, perhaps the most important thing of note about Newter is how all his body fluids contain a powerful hallucinogen able to incapacitate someone within a few seconds. Depending upon the dosage, the effect will last longer, but fortunately, despite how strong the hallucinogenic effects seem to be, there are no adverse side effects and one cannot overdose from it, as stated by Newter himself. I don't really have any weaknesses of particular note to mention, but if you can, try to take Newter out from a distance, and if you do get close to him, cover up, try to get the drop on him, and take him out quickly. He is more durable, but not that much more durable. Labyrinth is a Shaker, more importantly a Shaker 12. The basic premise of her power is the ability to alter/manipulate her immediate surroundings at will. Taking into consideration her high rating, there is evidently a lot of additional relevant details. I think an important first thing to cover is how far her range is. To put it plainly, it generally depends on two factors, her lucidity and how long she has been at a given location. In regard to the latter, for the boundaries of her power to expand, she needs to stay put at her given location. As time passes, her power will radiate out faster and faster. But if she moves, her range will be reduced to only a few feet around her. In regard to her lucidity, the less lucid she is, the stronger her ability to affect the world becomes. Additionally, how fast her power envelops an area will also increase along with how fast she can pull objects into her plane of reality. In the most optimal of circumstances, she was able to influence a very large portion of a mall, extending to most, if not all, shop exteriors, though perhaps not all their interiors. On that note, we can move on to the more complicated aspects of her power, beginning with the idea that she is not always in control of her power, in the sense that there are pocket worlds/realities in her mindscape that are reflections of her mental state and memories of good times or bad times. They are realities created and are altered by her conscious and unconscious thoughts. Though, while a number of her pocket worlds are shaped in ways out of her control, she can, with a bit of effort, form pocket worlds that are much more tailored. However, I will mention that she does prefer to build upon existing ones, as she found that to be better than continuously making new ones on a whim. To double back a bit, the earlier mentioned objects come from said pocket realities. It is better for her to use pre-existing worlds because she needs to search for the object or section of the world she wants to pull through. And if she's more familiar with a world, she can find what she wants/needs faster. So, looking back, it makes sense, to an extent, why being less lucid would benefit her. Considering how expansive, detailed, and intricate her worlds can be and are, if she is more immersed in them, then it makes the searching process easier. Having a better mental state also helps. That being said, the durability of what she pulls through is variable. Compared to their quote-unquote normal counterparts, the things Labyrinth pulls through are more fragile. The reason gets a bit into the mechanics behind power, so bear with my explanation. The relative fragility of the objects she brings forth stems from the idea of them existing in two places. A given object is there, but not all there, since some of its existence is anchored in one of Labyrinth's pocket worlds. While perhaps not the best way to describe it, imagine her objects being on an existence opacity slider with their opacity, as it were, not being full in the reality Labyrinth inhabits, and as such their partial existence makes them more fragile than expected. To be redundant, and to really hammer in the concept in another way, it is kind of like how an ice cube can freeze enough to have an ice shell around the water core, causing it to be an ice cube, but not having the full structural integrity of a fully frozen ice cube. It is more complicated, but that explanation should suffice. Now, two more things worth mentioning. Depending on the state of her power, Labyrinth won't always have full control on what gets brought through and or where something ends up appearing. Additionally, should she desire, she can exclude people from being affected by her power. She can make them unable to interact with what she brings in, and make it possible for them to altogether not even see what she has brought in. Labyrinth's weakness should be self-evident given presented information. However, to briefly reiterate, she is relatively helpless on her own. While she is still a formidable shaker, her power can and is very mentally debilitating. More so, to an extent, given her power requiring her to be relatively stationary, she cannot really act on her own, especially if she has not had time to expand her range and or if she is more lucid. The latter pitfalls shown are highlighted when she heavily struggled to assist her team when Burns' car attacked. Right, that was a bit long-winded, but let us move on to Spitfire. Her power can be best classified as Blaster. It is a simple one, but one with immense raw power. She can spew a torrent of napalm-like fluid from her mouth that automatically ignites when in contact with air. Said fluid was hot enough to melt concrete, stone, and steel. To note equipment, she wears a mask with a nozzle to help focus and control her power. She also wears a fire-resistant suit since regardless of if she was fire-resistant, burning clothes are not pleasant. Anyway, nothing to say about weaknesses besides the obvious, as in, not a brute, but she can certainly immolate you quite effectively regardless of not being extra durable. Shamrock can be considered a thinker-shaker combo. Interestingly, she does kind of qualify as a case 53. She has an Omega/C tattoo, but she does not have lost memories or is severely physically mutated. I won't say too much about that, but it is quite interesting. To get back to her powers, hers are subtle but potent. To be abstract, her power helps in making the quote-unquote pieces fall just right. To be more specific, she has micro-telekinesis paired with an unconscious form of clairvoyance, with a range extending to her more immediate environment. When it comes down to it, those two powers carefully alter outcomes, a sort of mini butterfly effect. Small actions creating greater change in a limited area, which leads to this illusion of her manipulating luck. From bullets precisely hitting what would do the most effective damage, to near misses that seem awfully convenient, to making 2 coins continuously land heads, or rolling 12 dice and having each roll 6. More generally, she is good at finding what she needs. Though, perhaps most importantly, it allows her to be a sort of dead zone for other clairvoyants/precogs. Sounds strong, and it is, but only up to a point. Sure, against greater odds it could help her avert death, but that does not mean that she won't get significantly roughed up. While we do not know how her powers would react to greater adversaries like the Endbringers, especially the Simorg, one can't imagine her powers are potent enough to the point where she can take them on in any significant degree. She struggled against Burnscar, and Contessa decisively beat her. Regardless, while it isn't much of a weakness, it is still good to note that her apparent manipulation of luck/probability can be beat, given some pre-planning and or sufficient firepower. Scrub is a blaster shaker combo, a nuker under the old classification system. He also has a slight trump aspect which allows his power to bypass many brute/power based defenses, even Alexandria's. Said power was the ability to create unaimed spheres of energy that would generate holes in his surroundings. The spheres would cut through anything they hit and seemingly at times annihilate matter. Additionally, they would cause an explosion. I will clarify that while he cannot precisely aim the spheres, he can influence the general direction they take and their frequency of occurrence. His power does seem to be mantin limited, in the sense that his spheres do not seem to cut into things that could lead to his death, such as appearing in a place that would compromise the structural integrity under/around him, or appearing within him. To go into power details once again, earlier with Labyrinth I brought up the notion of how powers could seemingly interact with alternate realities/dimensions. While her power was more direct compared to others, theoretically, most, if not all parahuman powers have some connection to alternate realities. For Scrub, he is not really destroying matter. His spheres are exchanging matter between points. His power cuts a sphere of matter on his Earth and switches it with a similar sphere of matter on another Earth. Additionally, the differences in atmospheric pressure are what causes the earlier noted explosions. While still on the topic of alternate Earths, and to give a bit of added information, the energy required to manifest the magical and physics-defying feats of powers needs to come from somewhere. That somewhere comes from parallel Earths. Whether it's a case of draining a lot from one or a few Earths versus draining a lot from an innumerable number of Earths, or what form of energy is even being taken, well, who knows. Nevertheless, due to that, capes like Sundancer can create miniature suns, Skitter can quote-unquote power her ability to control insects, and Scrub can form his matter teleporting spheres. Anyway, I don't have anything unique to say in regards to weaknesses, so onwards we go. Matroshka is another case 53. She is a stranger and interestingly a changer. Most case 53s do not typically get a changer classification, since while they certainly fit the criterion of having an altered physical form, they cannot change back into something more human looking in most cases. However, due to experience using her power and a bit of paint, she could look fairly normal. Though, upon closer inspection, she still had a lot of vertical and horizontal lines all across her body. Her appearance aside, her stranger classification is because she can turn herself into a mass of ribbons. On one hand, that could potentially be a good way to avoid notice, given certain circumstances. On the other hand, what truly made her a stranger is that she could envelop others in her ribbons and contain them within her while also taking in some of her target's memories and traits. As one can imagine, that could be a good infiltration power for a variety of reasons. Not limited to intelligence gathering, target detainment, and even ally aid, in the sense that she could hold people in suspension within her. So, should someone be critically injured, she could keep them stabilized, in a manner of speaking. However, the latter seemed to have developed some unknown time afterworm. Additionally, how long she could suspend someone along with how large of a person she could consume are bits of information not explicitly stated. In terms of weaknesses, or I suppose in this case power downfalls, whenever she consumed someone she loses a part of her original sense of self as she integrates some of her target's traits and memories into herself. The longer she held someone, the more her personality would be altered. That prolonged containment within her would also slowly digest the subject in question. However, after getting the ability to suspend someone within her, that digesting issue was less of an issue. As for the personality bleed while holding people in suspension, it was unknown if that was also paused, as far as I know. These last two will be quick. Whippersnap is another case 53 and is a mover. There's not too much known about him aside from him being a biospeedster. No unique weaknesses, though he is described as broomstick thin, so perhaps he breaks easily. Chantilly is yet another case 53, and once again there is not that much known about her besides being composed of lace. Though, in terms of displayed characteristics, she could be a brute, if you squint, considering her largely laced body seemed to have only made her a bit more resistant to otherwise uncomfortable cold. Besides that, she could also be a striker considering she could use the lace she was composed of and give them rigidity. How viable the latter was as a weapon though, also unknown. Once again, no displayed unique weaknesses, but perhaps she is a bit more flammable or gets heavily weighed down by water. Well, that is that. I don't have much else to say besides noting that Scrub onwards were much later additions to Faultline's crew, and as the title of this video shows, the crew eventually more formally named themselves Palanquin. Anyway, not that it really matters to anyone, but I will not be making videos for a while. Well, considering how long I take to complete a video anyway, that may mean nothing. But I kinda want to finally read all of Ward. I've only ever read up to Arc 5 and that was a while ago. More so, I'll probably be taking lore notes while doing so, and that will more than likely make the reading process even longer. On a related note, just because, I may also go back and read Worm and take lore notes for that. Mainly because whenever I do get back, I might start out with a pretty informal video. Well, more informal than how my current videos already are, and have it just be a general talk about various aspects of my videos, and mostly things I just want to get off my mind, so it'll probably be a really big mess of a video. Maybe it will be a stream, who knows? If I don't do that, whatever that is, I will more than likely have 3 videos about the Empire 88. About what exactly? It will be obvious by the first video. Nevertheless, I really need to get my own life in order, so until next time. Even if I don't know when that next time will be. Yeah, bye.